of our agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Jody? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And then we did distribute the minutes of our August meeting via email. Ann, did you receive any corrections to the minutes?
No, I didn't.
All right. So given that, I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the August governance council meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. All right, those are approved, and we can make sure those get posted today to the website. So as you see on our agenda, let's see if Pam needs a few more minutes, but we are going to make a practice of putting the items that are for council review, such as our minutes before they are approved, into Dropbox, so that we don't have to be concerned about keeping track of things in our inbox. And so Pam is going to demonstrate that in a minute. Then we're going to ask Dr. Shaw and staff to give us an update on our strategic plan, which we are scheduled to approve on September 25th. But in a conversation with the secretary and the vice chair and Dr. Shaw, we realized that given the council's request not to be asked to view something and approve it in the same meeting, and also given the complexity of this, that we really needed to have today as well on that topic. And then we do have Erica Cooper here. Erica, wave your hand. Erica is one of the charter system facilitators who is going to be working with some schools in this process, and she's going to describe the request for flexibility process, which is the process by which we will request waivers to state law or system policy in the future. And then we do have 10 minutes allocated for public speakers. So with that, I'll turn it over to Pam.
Okay, we're going to attempt to do all of our communication in Dropbox, which means you will get a link invited to join the governance Dropbox, and that will be where we deposit all of the documents, the agenda, the minutes, strategic planning documents, pretty much everything you need. So if anybody hasn't worked with Dropbox, it's pretty easy. Once you're invited, you just click on and accept, and you should have access. But if anybody has any difficulties, I hear Opie's the master Dropbox guy, so he's probably better than I am. I know how to deposit stuff, but if there's a difficulty, he'd probably be the one to help you. But it would come up in a folder just like governance. And then this is the September meeting. And so there are the minutes that y'all just approved, that we just approved. And then instead of the email thing and instead of the printed copies, the plan is for you to review the minutes before the meeting, and then we can approve them. And then we would have access really to update these as we approve them and make changes, so we wouldn't have to come back later. You know, I could easily do that. So what would be posted here would be the agenda, the minutes, and then if you go back to the last meeting, you'll see that we've got action items from August in here. So everything will be in one place, and if you want to go back and review any meetings and what we've done, they'll all be there. So this is just a quick demonstration to know it's coming. So hopefully next meeting will be on this format. Anybody have any questions? Okay.
So they get a notice to go to the Dropbox?
They get a notice, they've been invited. In your email, you'll have you've been invited to join the governance Dropbox, and you will just accept it, and then that will give you access to it. Now, Opie, you may, if everybody knows how to put it on your shortcuts, it's on your main screen. If you don't, I'm sure we can help you with that. But that means you don't have to go find it every time you're looking for it. But you saw when I booted up, I just ended up going right to these are my shortcuts, and there's my Dropbox. So I go to the Dropbox, and then, and this is a wireless, this is an internet-based tool, so you do have to have access to the internet. It's not and that's where they are.
I have a question. So obviously the public doesn't have access to this.
Right.
But I imagine it'd be pretty easy to move documents from there and then have Ms. Miller.
To the website, correct.
Okay.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, this really is more working documents, you know, like before we approve the minutes, because we don't post the minutes until they've been approved. So this is for us to review them and make changes and then post them to the website.
And we cannot make changes to those documents? These
Yeah, anything that's
documents-
posted as a PDF, you can't make a change to, right? But the other thing that this works well, if there's stats or documents, like part of the strategic planning process, instead of all these thick packets that Mr. Blackwell brings, then we can review these online. Now, if we need copies for specific reasons, we can make those choices, but the whole goal would be anybody that has a lot of documents to share, we put them here, and we can hopefully avoid a lot of the paper process.
Pam, do you want to talk about how you can access it just through a URL in case people don't want to download that whole system?
Yeah, and you may have to help me through that one because I've done it before, but, okay, now I don't know whether, see, I'm not gonna be here, but you can go to dropbox.com and you can access it through that way. You wanna tell them how that works? Do they have to know its governance? Do they have to, what does it look like? Without doing it, I'm not sure I can tell them right this minute.
Well, you know, like anything, it'll prompt you to log in. The first step that you need to do is to have accepted the invitation and to have made yourself an account. So, I don't know if you've invited everyone or not, Pam, but
We haven't yet.
we can do that, and I can work on that. But once you get the invitation, you create yourself an account, just password, and your login is your Fulton County, or will be your Fulton County email address. And then Pam has already made, like she's showing you, several folders on there, but the web version looks almost similar. You know, you can just click little buttons that say upload a document to a certain folder. And that, it's really pretty simple. Like I just uploaded a document, but you can't see it because you're not connected to the internet.
Right.
There's also an iPhone app too, isn't there?
And an iPad app.
Okay.
So I
But
think-
we'll help you through that, but the goal is to try to deposit everything there that's a working document. And
Yeah, I think once you're invited, because Pam invited me already, and I've used it for some other projects, it basically prompts you into how to log in. And then from then on, if you get a notice that something's in there, you just click on the link and it'll take you right to it. So when you post something new, it does send a notice to the group, right? Yeah. So you don't have to worry about knowing to go check it before the meeting. You'll get a notice that comes in and posted. Okay?
And we may double up and print stuff next month just in case for people that have trouble, but we'll work through it, and hopefully this will be our platform for working documents.
And so then for those of you who, you know, also, like me, I already have a Dropbox and that's fine, or if you create this and want to use it for yourself, you still can. The governance folder is just it's a shared folder amongst this group. So you can even still on your own Dropbox create folders that are not going to be visible to everyone else here. So don't worry about putting something up there. But if you do put it in the shared folder, then it's visible to whomever is in this group.
So our committees can use that also. So the communication.
Yeah, committees could create their own subfolders and share them just with those members or however.
Okay, well, we'll keep working through this, but I wanted, rather before we just send everybody the link, I wanted for Pam to do a demonstration for us. So thank you so much, Pam, and she's gonna take on setting that up, and I'm gonna roll with our new secretary. We appreciate it. So at this point, our major agenda item is the strategic planning update, and I'll just turn it over to Dr. Shaw and the team to walk us through that.
Well, let's back up a little bit. So where this process started is right when I came on board back in May. Mr. Blackwell had already done a great job getting community input, stakeholder input, and meeting with many people in the community to find out what their concerns were, what were some goals for us. And we also spent a lot of time this summer with some members of this group looking at our strategic data, looking at how our kids are performing on various different measures. So then what happened in the last 3 weeks is we took all these ideas, all this information, and gave it to the department heads and the admin. And then from that, the department heads and the administration came up with many different initiatives, many different ideas. And what we told them was to think outside the box, and that's an overused phrase, but to think about, in a perfect world, if you had no parameters, what would you like to do for the kids here at Riverwood? What are some things that you would like to see changed? What are some things that you would love to do? And then what we did is we took those ideas, put them on pieces of paper, put them here in the media center, and allowed the staff to come in and make comments and provide their feedback. Just as a logistic purpose, so for example, there was a piece of paper that may have said, whatever, hypothetically, change the start time, and Mr. Blackwell was demonstrating, and they were asked to put a blue dot if they agreed with it, a green dot, no, excuse me, a green dot if they agreed with it, a blue dot if they had some questions, and a red dot if they said absolutely not.
You were right the first time. Blue was,
I'm sorry.
I love it.
Blue was I love it, green was not sure about it, red was this idea is terrible. And then what Mr. Blackwell did is collected all that, we talked about it as an administrative team, and then he's compiled this information to share with you today. And if you're good to go over there, sir, I'll turn it over to you.
There we go. So that's our process in short. And the one thing that I would want you to know probably, and I'll give you an example. One of the reasons that we asked the staff for their input on these initiatives was because we didn't feel like we wanted that to be created in a vacuum of just the administrative team or what we call the school leadership team. But for those of you that aren't familiar, that includes the department heads of all the departments, like counseling, media center, as well as the academic departments as well. So what I would want you to know, though, of course, is that feedback is very valuable. There are some things, that the staff might not have been as gung-ho about that we may, in fact, decide is something that we really need to address anyway. Be that a specific training or something like that. But by and large, their feedback was very helpful. So I'll just give you a quick example. One of the objectives that we have set forth, and then we'll dive into each of them so that you can see them in full, was to increase academic remediation. So that's what this sheet is, and up at the top highlighted in yellow is that objective, to increase academic remediation. And then underneath it, the department chairs and the school leadership team listed several different initiatives that might help us address the need to increase academic remediation. So an example that I think everyone probably here in the room is familiar with is continue the Sacred Wednesday school-wide kind of help sessions. Most of you, I think, know about that if you have children who go here. Every Wednesday we call Sacred Wednesday, and we schedule no morning meetings so that we can be sure that each teacher is available to meet with kids who need help. So just as an example, that top one got blue dots and one green, so I guess 2 greens. A couple of people weren't as sure about that. Whereas to the idea of, I'll give you this fourth one down, creating a department shared tutoring schedule where a few teachers might be available any given morning to help students. So say in science, opposed to having each teacher available every morning for students, the idea was, or the idea that was offered was, well, maybe we could say, Mr. Blackwell and Dr. Shaw are our 2 science teachers who are available on Monday and Tuesday of this week, and 2 others are available this next morning. So to sort of divide and conquer, so that there could be someone available to assist every day. That was not a popular idea. It got almost all red dots. So just as an illustration, I mean, the feedback was helpful to know what the faculty was interested in doing, and really what they weren't. So I used this information that we did on each of the objectives that we listed to kind of help guide a little bit. And like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to have a conversation about something else. Even if faculty, said, I don't really know if I want to do that. Examples of that would be, if we decide that we really need to do some work with our course teams, which for those of you who aren't familiar is it's sort of our collaborative team that our teachers plan in. So if I teach 9th grade lit and you teach 9th grade lit, we are a course team and we do planning together. If we decide that we need to do some real specific training there, even if the teachers didn't react well to it, that might be something that we decide to undertake, just as an example. So the first document that we're to produce that kind of summarizes all of this, I'm going to pass around and I'll show you what it's showing you, or talk you through what it's showing you. it houses the first, I guess really 4 steps, but it feels like a lot more of that to the process here. I'll wait till everyone gets it. While we're passing, Martha, Mrs. Greenwood, excuse me.
Marcus, just fine.
Early. Now, we're just asking that folks kind of have an understanding of this morning and see where we are and to give current feedback. Am I right about that?
That's correct.
Okay.
We'll need to, we do need to formally adopt it, but not until we meet on the 20th.
And let me jump in quickly. In addition to this information, there's some other things going on here that I think will factor into decisions that this governance council makes. One is we've established a professional development committee for our staff, and their job is to, and they're going to come up with a plan, and we'll talk about that on the 13th, Friday the 13th. Their job is to look at what we're doing for our teachers in this building and what do they need. Do we need, Mr. Blackwell mentioned course teams. Do we need to strengthen that? Is that something we need to train teachers in? Do we need to train teachers at Riverwood in assessment strategies? Do we need to talk about content knowledge, which is something that was brought up by a member of the administrative team, that we just assume all our teachers have the content knowledge? So the professional development committee is working on that. I think that will focus into some of our strategic planning. This, right now we have, and all of you are aware of this, we have a survey in the field regarding our schedule. If the data comes back and says, listen, we need to make a change, then obviously this group and parents and students will put together a committee to start looking at what our options are to change a bell schedule. But again, that closes tomorrow, Mr. Blackman?
Yes.
Okay. And then the last thing is, and we haven't had this conversation as a group, but I'm very excited about what Ridgeview has done with their safety committee and looking at safety in the building. I would love to see that as something that we can talk about here. And again, that's another thing that plugs into our strategic plan. So in addition to the data we've collected, there are a lot of moving pieces right now working to improve, and I think we need to take all that into consideration as well. So, all right, back to you, sir.
Sure. So on the left-hand side of your paper, just let me explain to you what you're going to see. In the dark green box are our 3 what are called long-term outcomes. They are, in essence, kind of the guiding body to the rest of what's on the paper. They have driven everything to the right of it. Those statements, you'll notice, are all kind of worded around action, like increasing something or enhancing something, and none of them are written about adults. You know, so the comment that we've heard in the past was, really one of the things that Riverwood needs to focus on is climate, culture, staff morale, things like that. Well, that can't be encompassed in a long-term outcome because they're supposed to be and need to be written entirely around the kids. So each of the 3 that we have there are kind of kid-centric, appropriately statements, and I'll kind of tell you where they came from. So the first one is to enhance the 9th grade students' academic performance. It's our belief at Riverwood, and has been for a long time, for good reason, that it's important to focus on the 9th graders and to ensure that they have a great experience starting their high school career. As you know, if the child gets off track in 9th grade and gets retained, then the statistics surrounding that student graduating at all, or certainly graduating on time, in other words, catching back up, are staggering and shocking. And so, suffice it to say, that there's a reason to focus on that. And even at Riverwood, there's more of a reason to focus on it because in the past, our 9th grade students haven't performed incredibly well. We have had high course failure rates for our freshmen in the core areas, specifically math and science. So I can get into more of that if we need to, but enhance our 9th grade students' academic performance is one of the long-term outcomes. Second one is increase students' application of learning outside the classroom. I kind of, when we talked that through with our leadership team, that one is potentially a bit harder to grasp just on first read, but it's sort of intended to capture this idea that at Riverwood, with our global studies program and the international baccalaureate, the magnet program, we are striving to embrace more learning than just what typically occurs in a 49-minute class period. So be that the opportunity and ability to offer students internships in the TAG program or in the community. Be that the ability to offer them opportunities to travel to places around Atlanta to further the study that they might be doing in English and social studies and so on and so forth. Or if it's just simple things like doing some community service work like our CAS program requires in the International Baccalaureate. So it's intended to kind of capture that idea that we want to embrace here at Riverwood much more than just what's happening in the 49 minutes, and we want that learning to extend outside the classroom. And then the third one is to increase engaging learning experiences for all students. Those are kind of our three long-term outcomes that are going to guide everything to the right of that. So that's even a lot to take in. Do you want me to pause there and see if anyone has any questions, or maybe not even questions, just comments or thoughts? Or
Just one comment. I think number 2, that's where the foundation's focus is moving forward, is business connections externally. And we had a wonderful meeting with Sherry Smith, IB Business, and we talked about how can we continue to engage businesses in field trips and internships, and there's a lot of exciting things going on there, but just stay tuned for that. But I think the parents can help with that. You talked about it's not as easy to do because it is external focus, and that's our goal. So.
I also had a meeting with the Sandy Springs Education Force, and they were very interested in giving us the money and means for getting kids exposed to things outside of Riverwood. One of the things that I've shared is with some of our at-risk kids, what they need to be exposed to is what's out there. Sometimes their vision is very limited, and I would love an opportunity to show them what does a successful college student look like, what does a business owner look like, and the Sandy Springs Education Force has come up with some ideas of literally putting kids on buses and taking them and showing them the world outside of Sandy Springs, which I think would be great. So if we could build some of that and make that happen, that'd be awesome. Hey, Joey, had your hand?
Yeah, just a point of clarification. When you say increase engaging learning experiences for all students, could you elaborate a little further on what the actual improvements being sought is?
Sure. So let me tell you a little bit about where that comes from. It's a good question, Joey. So a prime example would be when we had, when the school district had Cambridge Education come to most of the schools, I think by now. Ours was in February of 2012, I think. It was a group intended to be an impartial group, but of education folks who just kind of evaluated all things Riverwood. So I don't know if you were involved, Joey, but they met with students and parents and faculty members, and they walked around all the classrooms, and they met with the administrators and so on and so forth. But one of the things that came out of that also comes out of some of the student surveys that we've discussed here in this group. I think last time, the parent surveys is, that there might not be a lot of good, there might be some, but not a lot of good differentiated instruction happening. So the idea that what you need to learn in a particular unit, take math as an example, I'm certain is very different than what I am capable of learning. So I think that's kind of one of the intentions there, is that whatever is happening in the classroom, our focus needs to be on making sure that it's engaging for you in math. You are much more talented than I am, I'm certain. But it also needs to be engaging and appropriate for me as well. So that's just one example.
I have a question if you're done with. You have enhanced ninth grade students' academic performance, and so I understand everything that you're saying. A lot of the time it starts at the beginning and at the root. But for two subsidiary groups outside of that, for people that either are transferring in later or people that missed the mark in the ninth grade, what are our goals to help bring those students up from 10th, 11th, and, well, let's not say 12th, let's say 10th and 11th.
So hopefully by 12th.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I think that's really, they're broad, Deborah, each of these three are. And I think that's really the idea behind number 3. I mean, the first one is just a statement about we really do believe in the importance of ninth grade. So the Bridge program that we did this past summer, the REACH program that we've done in the past, some of the additional initiatives that we'll make. But I think in number 3, there's an acknowledgement that you can't just start strong in 9th grade and then stop, that we have to figure out, how we're gonna make instruction engaging for 10th grade, and not even just on-level students. Because I think all too often what gets lost in some of these plans is, we focus on what everyone calls the middle, right? I mean, there are lots of things at the bottom, lots of programs, and we talk about the top, but a lot of it's focused on the middle. So I think the 3rd one is intended to be, what are we gonna do for an honors level student versus a non-level student versus a remediated student? And there are more specifics as we get to the right, so I can go on.
So I guess that'll filter out as we go over the colors.
Yeah, exactly. So what happens to the right of that then is we're to create, I guess I should have said, you can have in between 3 and 5 long-term outcomes. We've obviously decided to go 3. To the right of that, in kind of the orange, then we're to create focus areas that sort of branch off and begin to hone in a little bit on what some of those statements mean or what we might need to do to start addressing some of those long-term outcomes. We've got 4 listed. The first one is under a category that we're calling student engagement. That's something that we need to focus on. Second one is student support. The third one is data-driven instruction, and the 4th one is community and communication. So the way that I think of it is, to me, those just sound like, decent things to be focusing on in a school. There's a little kind of purpose statement beneath each one of them, but it's just intended to kind of hone in a little bit on, if we're going to address enhancing the 9th grade students' academic performance, then what do we need to do? Or if we're going to increase application and learning outside the classroom, what do we need to do? So to Pam's point, to increase students' application of learning outside the classroom, there's going to have to be a great partnership with community and a great communication plan with them. Because she's right, that's not something that we're going to be able to pull off entirely on our own. And in fact, it is something that folks like Sandy Springs Education Force have said, we will help you do if you can just tell us what you'd like us to help you do. So that's why the communication is part of that community. So that gets us then to over in the gray area, and then I'll let you ask questions after you've had a minute to read some of those. The objectives are all written as some kind of an increased statement. These are supposed to be measurable, and we'll have to set actual measures to them and describe how we'll measure them, in more detail. But the objectives still aren't yet describing our action. In fact, over on the far right is where we get down to the action. But the objectives, again, are just to filter it down level by level. So if you take number 1, if we're focusing on student engagement, which in theory will help us with the 9th grade students' academic performance, and the 3rd one, then what kinds of things do we need to do? Overwhelmingly, our leadership team talked about increasing the use of technology in lesson plans as an example, or increasing teachers' use of differentiated instruction, increasing use of applied lessons and projects, or just a couple of examples from that top box that particularly relate to the student engagement. So those lines are deliberate. Focus area number 1 goes directly over to those objectives and measures. Don't want to read that to everyone because it's just going to be me reading a lot, but I might give you a couple minutes to glance over some of the gray. If you prefer, you can even begin looking over to some of the initiatives that are over on the right. I'll talk more about some of the initiatives, but maybe just give you a second to glance over the gray and see if anyone has any thoughts or questions or comments.
And if I can just add, well, not to talk while you're reading, but, and Ms. Cooper's going to talk a little bit about this. I struggled with really understanding what the flexibility process means. What, at the end of the day, can we ask for and what can we not ask for? What are we allowed to ask the district as far as waivers and what will get approved? So kind of being the first school, one of the first schools through this process, we're kind of breaking some ground here, and I think Ms. Cooper would agree with that. So that's what I struggle with a little bit is, these are some great ideas. What can we actually get done?
Well, one thing I'm not sure if it's related to the waiver issue or not, but one of the things that this group has discussed repeatedly that I don't really see reflected here is this whole question of what does it mean to be an international magnet program and an international school. And it just seems that that should be reflected in here somewhere.
Well, and actually, we had a conversation administratively about that, because the problem was, I'll just share my thoughts with you.
Sure.
Is that more of a strategic plan, or is that, and maybe I'm wrong, and this group will certainly tell me that, or is that more of a mission vision statement that we need to revisit? Do we as a school, as a governance body, need to step back and revisit what is our focus? Why do we call ourselves an international school? What is our magnet program really designed to do? Why is it beneficial? And if that should be included in here, that's great. I didn't know if maybe that was something that we need to revisit just from a big picture perspective, just as a mission and vision of what we're here for.
Well, I think there is a mission vision element to it, but I think there's also sort of a strategic action related to that, which I'm concerned if it's not explicitly on here, it's not going to happen. And we've talked about it repeatedly, and you've heard my sort of position on it. But frankly, it makes little to no sense to me that you get credit for an international magnet seal by taking AP US history, but not by taking international business, because of the way that program was initially designed to be so many credits in certain types of courses, and with all of the opportunities, and particularly if we're looking at expanding to partnerships with the community and learning opportunities outside the classroom, it just seems that there's a much richer programmatic offering that we could have available around this concept of being an international magnet. And so it is to me more than, like, what does that mean for us? It's actually, are we going to have a magnet program? What is that going to look like? What's it take to get in it? What does it take to stay in it? And if you're not in a magnet program, then what international experiences does this school offer that make it unique? So anyway, it seems like that's been a conversation we've been running around since I've been on the council, and I just don't feel like the work is represented here. I don't know, other thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna second you on that. I'm sorry I didn't speak up. That kind of was one of the things that I thought about when we were thinking about a strategic plan. But as I think of the strategic plan, it seems like that's the chicken before the egg. Seemingly, that kind of conversation would have transpired and happened before putting together a strategic plan. So assuming that we were based on whatever our overall vision and missions are, is what a strategic plan would come out of. And I couldn't agree with Martha more that if we are an international, an IB school, then our strategic plan should actually roll out of that, as opposed to what I think I heard you say, which means that you wanted to think about this as a separate entity or simultaneously with the strategic plan. I actually think that part would probably come first. Considering we've already made a judgment of this is how the school should be, then it probably should be highlighted somewhere in the strategic plan.
Well, but let me back up to that. When you said there's a judgment of how the school should be, I can tell you as coming in new, I've asked probably 15 people what the magnet program is and got 17 different answers. So I don't think we really nailed all that down, and maybe that is.
So maybe that conversation should happen prior to us putting this together, though this is really good work.
Right.
But I think that's a really big piece that we are missing.
But then the other part of that too is, I'm sorry, man, when you said, we're an IB school, true, we're an international school, but when you look at the numbers that I'm getting ready to show you, some of this is directed at some of our lowest achieving students. And that's also the part that we can't forget either is, yes, we need to have this international focus, but we have a group of kids who live in our area right down the street who need some assistance and need some help, and that's where a lot of these initiatives, and Mr. Blackwell, correct me if I'm wrong, that's where a lot of these initiatives came from as well.
And that goes,
One thought on that, if I can just, because I think we're talking about what came first and what comes last, and I'm not sure at this point there's not an easier solution. If you look at these 3 strategic points, they would apply to any high school. they would apply to any highly academic performing high school, and that's good. Maybe we need to add a fourth that applies to initiatives that are unique to Riverwood and factor into what is it, instead of redoing and going back and all of that, these are rock solid for any high performing high school. But we want to be unique here as a charter school, and we have the opportunity to apply for waivers, and if we added a fourth strategic initiative around the academic curriculum specific to Riverwood and how that benefits a student, and then flowed that down to strategic initiatives around the curriculum, and what does it mean to be an international school unique to Riverwood, then this work is rock solid. Now we're just adding a layer on a fourth strategic initiative that defines Riverwood and what does that look like. And yes, there's a lot of work that has to be done in that to figure out what that looks like. But I don't think we then get caught up in, well, that should have been done first, and that should have been done later. I think this is a great foundation.
We can
It's
add
just
that.
how can we then make us unique and add, because we can have 3 to 5, you said,
Yes,
so
we
let's
can
add one and.
So let's stay on
I
that
would like to
topic.
say that
Number 2, increase students' application of learning outside the classroom fits into a STEAM International Studies magnet or an IB school. We used to have students that worked at CARE. That's an international organization. It's possible we could have students work at the Carter Center. I mean, I think we can fit that under number 2, and then you don't need to add a fourth. It needs to be another focus area
Okay.
that focuses on the international aspect that we're all trying to focus on. Because I think number 2 says application outside the classroom. Our focus would be more so an international aspect.
Does that address the curriculum issues, though, the academic
But then I'm
coursework?
applying that knowledge. If I'm studying in Latin American Studies in Dr. Cox's class, I'm applying it because I'm looking at the Carter Center and I'm doing research with Dr. Pestor, who's over Latin American Studies there. So that does
Where
apply
do
to
you think the academic thing that Martha was talking about fits, though, in terms of what is required course-wise to be an IB magnet or IB or international studies magnet? Do you think
That goes
that's
to our-
addressed in there?
That goes to our mission or our vision, but that fits under number 2. I think it's definitely there. That's a specific under Riverwood in terms of what we decide is magnet or IB or what have you.
So
And it
let
could
me,
be an action statement.
I think what maybe you're suggesting, which actually I kind of like, is, I should have said it that way. Oh, I actually like what you said. But I think what I heard you say is that, you know, these actually perhaps are what we want for all students, but maybe what we're missing is a focus area. So that as we work on ninth grade academic performance, application outside the classroom, and engaging learning experiences for all students, the international lens is another focus area through which we could do really all of those things, rather than having an outcome about internationalism.
Right.
You know, it's actually an approach to our work that makes us unique, that then we could talk about, work along all 3 outcomes. Because I do want to make clear in my statement, I wasn't talking about the international baccalaureate kids. I'm talking about every student. And I really think that this international opportunity that we have can be a method of engaging some students who right now are the ones that are not doing as well. If we think about it in a different way, then we're kind of locked into this box about it's a certain number of courses and a certain number of subjects, and let's just throw that box away and start over again and say if we wanted to be an international school and really use it to engage students and get them involved outside the classroom and really get our ninth graders to perform well, what would that look like?
I don't know that we need to start over again. And the reason I say that is because as an IB school, we have the model in place. We're trying to develop international mindedness, which is a view to tolerance. We're trying to create a better world. And so what does that look like through the curriculum? And IB has that model in place. We currently have that model in place with NYP and lesson planning and pieces like that. So the extent to which it's reflected here, perhaps it should be a bit more explicit. But I don't know that we need to go about reinventing absolutely everything because we have a good model to work with.
And also, yeah, I also agree. The way I look at this is, like, this is, you know, something to improve student achievement. This is, you know, it targets that, and it's like the skeleton for what we have to do. But then, you know, we need to clothe the body with the international mindedness and, you know, bring those things, and do those things through classroom instruction and all those things. It's kind of like put a layer of clothes like on top of this naked body. that's the only way I can, try to explain what I'm saying. So, I agree with what you're saying, but I just think that this is the main focus, this is student achievement, and then we can fix it up with the international mindedness in the way we teach in the classroom, the way we communicate with our students and so forth throughout the school.
Okay, any other thoughts on that?
Yes. From the perspective of the student and also from multiple students I've spoken with, frankly, I don't know if you could use this as a way to talk about how the program has kind of faded away or as just a way of like a state of the school as it is. But I don't think any students really care that much right now that we're an international magnet school. Because I think right now each of these long-term outcomes is much more meaningful to a student. The fact that we can actually make sure that we're on par with the appropriate level of a high school and making sure that we have all the educational needs met and making sure that everything's satisfactory before we go and further it and really develop this international perspective. So I think right now I'm on Dr. Shaw's way of thinking, where I think that let's try getting everything else back on point before we really try zeroing in on something that really at this point is not too noticeable in the student's life at the current state.
I have something to add to that too. Right now, mostly if you're an IB student, you know what that means. You have this curriculum, whatever. But kids who are in the magnet program, it just to them is, it's a seal that's been on their diploma and nothing more. And I know we talked about this at our student meeting, but like it used to be that if you were in the magnet program, if you didn't want to take an IB course that you had to take the social studies, you could take the magnet course of it and you weren't in on level. And some of those kids who were geared more towards, honors and IB and AP classes but don't want to take that IB course are stuck in these on-level classes and aren't necessarily doing as well because they're in an environment where they feel like nobody else really cares about the class. Mm-hmm. And that really does take away from, even as a freshman, if you're not in a class where you feel like the other kids are learning and want to be there, you're not going to do as well because you're like, well, if they don't care, why do I care? And so I think that, coming back with those magnet classes for the magnet students who are really, in the program for the right reasons is important, to get those kids really on track.
So there's I think a point in there too that we've also talked about repeatedly that I don't really see reflected in here, which kind of gets into this as well, but this whole labeling of certain courses as magnet courses when actually they don't have anything to do with the magnet seal or the IB program. And so I don't know that we need to right here decide how this gets addressed in the strategic plan, but I am hearing a sense that these questions around, because it would be one thing if we just decided we were going to have an IB diploma and the rest of it was going to go away. But what concerns me is we seem to have this magnet program and these magnet courses that, as I talk to people coming into the school, are highly confusing and don't represent, I think, what common sense would have you assume about them. And this, to me, is our opportunity to find a way to straighten that out. And I like the idea of, as a means of helping students realize these long-term outcomes. And I don't know that we need to tell you exactly how to do that, but maybe when you bring it back in September, you all could talk about how to have that somehow addressed.
Or even through professional development. I mean, that could be one of the topics that the professional development committee could discuss and train teachers. We have so many new teachers, to get everybody on board. A clear definition of what is magnet, the expectations for the students, teachers, that could be like a huge professional development committee.
Well, and here's my thought, and I think I'm getting ready to wander blissfully into a minefield. But what I think maybe for September, what I can do is kind of, and I've talked with a lot of people who have told me about what the magnet program was, how it changed. Maybe I could bring that information to this group and say, here's where we were, here's where we are. I finally found Roxy Garber, who's the keeper of all things Riverwood, who really was able to kind of explain, and Dr. Kopkis and many others. So maybe if I brought that, and again, I think we're a little bit off this, I don't know, and Erica, maybe you can help if this is something that is built into our strategic plan, or if this is something that should be done differently. Either way, my thought is if we can bring this information to the table next time we meet, and I don't mind delegating to Mr. Blackwell, just kidding. I don't mind doing a presentation about what it was, what it is now, and maybe building from that conversation into what we want it to be. Because it is, like Ms. Greenway said, it is a little disconcerting that really nobody can tell us this is what the program is, and your kid is in a magnet class or they're not, and then what's the difference? You know, is it just one more course and that makes you a magnet student? Is it a different way of looking at the world? So I think we need to nail that down so we can communicate it to our people in our community.
Is that not identified in a current waiver? Because every school's not a magnet, right? So wouldn't that language as it exists now, or no? I mean, how did magnet status become, wouldn't it have to have been a waiver anyway as part of the charter?
The
No?
schools, and maybe we can talk about this next time, but the school system actually created 4 magnet programs within 4 schools that were under-enrolled as a means to
Right.
increase enrollment by drawing people from other parts of the
Right,
community. And so that, we've inherited that.
right.
So,
So that's different than classes that are magnet. That's totally separate.
I don't think, and I'm trying to do this from memory, which is horrible, I don't think there's anything in our current charter or the last charter that says that there was a waiver for us to have a magnet program. I don't think that. I think it was just a district developed program.
Okay.
so again, I think what I'm just suggesting is that, not that this is the answer to these questions, but that somewhere in here, figuring out the answers to those questions in a way that aligns with these 3 outcomes is explicitly stated. Because otherwise, I'm afraid we've got this sort of strategic thought work here while we've got this running, and I think the 2 things need to be in agreement.
I just have one parting piece of information that I'd like to add. Even though I understand what we've been talking about is the focus and the majority of the students that attend here. I find it a little disconcerting though that we are an IB school and that's the flagship that people know us by. And we have maybe 20 kids each year that diploma in IB. 50. That diploma in IB.
Well, we've got over 200 students involved in the program in some way. Last year, we administered over 500 different kinds of exams. So when we start talking about a percentage of the body, student body, let's not just say it's just 20 kids.
Well, no, he said.
Because it's far, well, but it's even, if we're talking about diploma program kids, it's far in excess of that. If we're talking about people involved in the diploma program taking some sort of course, we're in excess of 200. Then if you count what's going on with the MYP program, that's all 9th and 10th grade. So this is something that is a guiding vision for the school that is not just for a small elite group of students. And I think that needs to be very clear, and perhaps
When
I
you
need
say
to do
this,
a
you
better
mean
job.
the strategic plan?
Well, I'm not talking about the strategic plan, I'm just trying to say that this is more than just a small program for a few students to benefit from.
And just to back up on that, sorry, Marcia, just to back up on that, you know, we've talked as a professional development committee about using that MYP model as a lesson plan for the entire faculty. That would look different from department to department, but it does have a tremendous, I mean, it aligns to everything we're already trying to do. And then, you know, what I've done every Monday for the last 3 weeks is sent that MYP plan out and talk in an email about one more part of it, because I think it is a safe direction to go. I think it's pedagogically very sound, and I also think that it does align with what we're trying to accomplish as far as that international focus. So we are working on that, but it's kind of in the beginning stages of building it throughout the whole building. Sorry, Ms.
And even though we don't have many students with special needs to graduate with the IB diploma, but we do, our teachers do teach through those lenses. You know, all 10th grade students will participate in the MYP project, and even, you know, students who are in self-contained, students with special needs who are in self-contained classes will also participate. So it trickles down. You know, you may have them students earning a diploma at one end, but then there's little remnants that trickle down all the way to our self-contained classes of students with special needs.
Okay, well, please understand the intent behind what I'm stating, is that I'm not saying that we're not using the IEP program in the school. We are. I'm not saying that it's not touched in a lot of kids, but if you look at the percentage, how many children do we? 1,700.
Six was last count,
Yeah.
1654.
Okay, close to 1,700. If you look at it as a percentage of the number of schools, and we say that we're an IB school, we've done some great strides, I think, in putting the IB feel along the way. In the 9th grade, 10th grade, the programs you just spoke of, people who don't diploma, but also they're an IB candidate and those types of things. But I'm just saying, as an overall view of percentage of kids, it just does not seem to me to be reflective of an IB school. Now, that's just my opinion. And for those of you that share it, great, and for those of you that don't, I just would love to see it be more of a flavor throughout the majority of the students here in the school.
Okay.
So I think there is room, probably in the second long-term outcome, if we do a little bit of work, digging a little bit deeper into that, I think we can bring that back.
Well, and I'd just like to see, like I said, I think there needs to be a flow of work coming out of the strategic plan to answer some of these questions about what is the magnet program, what are the magnet classes, what does it mean to be an international charter school, and how is that reflected through this work. And I think this governance council needs to be a part of that process and that decision making. So spent a lot of time on that issue.
Can I just make one quick comment? I think we don't need to get IB diploma confused with international studies, because they're not exactly the same thing. An international baccalaureate is a diploma, but international thinking, I loved your comment that we absolutely want every student graduating here thinking outside of their own individual world in Sandy Springs, much broader internationally. And that can be overlaid onto basic, solid core curriculum that every student can excel in. So I think that is the goal. I think we're all kind of saying the same thing, but the semantics are getting in the way. So if we can weave that into the plan, I think that'd be great.
We'll send you back with that.
We need a glossary.
That direction. Yeah, that glossary would not hurt. All right, so we do need to move on so our guests can share with us. Are there other let me just ask this. This is part one of a two-part conversation. So are there other big concepts that you feel are missing or that we disagree with? And then the charge from here would be to review this carefully prior to the next meeting. And I'll send out a note to maybe come back with any specific questions. But are there any big topics that you see as not addressed that you thought should be, or things that you have concerns about in terms of big topics?
Just one question. Usually strategic plans are backed up by operational plans. What's the process for that? That gets down to your point. How do you get this done?
Sure.
You know, all of these are great goals, but how does that happen, and who's responsible for that?
Well, obviously it's my responsibility, but what we would do is take the strategic initiative, sit down with the administrative team, plus some of the other components, the leadership team, the professional development committee, the scheduling committee when that gets rolling, so I think that factors in here if the data shows, and of course our safety committee that we're gonna start. And then we put these into action. How are we gonna get it? What's the ABC nuts and bolts of how this gets done? For example, there was one on here, implementing a system converting voicemail to faculty email. We found out that the district's already working on that. So that's something we can say, because you're exactly right, all this is talk unless we put action with it. The district's already working on number one. So that's what would happen.
And then if there's anything that the parent community, you know, if we're gonna move toward external involvement in the school, and this is more a waiver question, what are the limitations we have as a public school? For instance, we talked about clubs before and the fact that they're teacher-led and the teachers just don't have the time to do a lot of the meetings, and do parents need to be involved in that? So that's more of a waiver issue. But if we're going to accomplish some of these objectives, which bring the external community here, we need to look at what's the access, what are the requirements, and do we need waivers and things like that. So that may be good for the next discussion.
All right, so everyone has a responsibility to review this more carefully. And,
Before we move on, I just want to make sure it's understood what you want the administration to do. Are we going to go back and revise this and then send it back out, or what is, because I know Mr. Black has already started writing over there and adding some things about our discussion to some of these long-term outcomes. Is that what you want us to do? Okay, gotcha.
and so we'll let, you've kind of heard all of this, so using your best judgment about the process and the other things that you're working on, decide how you might weave that in and address it,
So,
and then get it back to us, and then we'll review carefully and be prepared for our meeting at the end of September. So while Erica comes forward, and let me also introduce Crystal Clark is also here, who is newer than Erica. And I believe Crystal's actually the facilitator that's assigned to our school.
Yes, ma'am.
Teacher, okay, Crystal Clark. And while you all are getting set up, we do have a sign-up sheet here for anybody who wanted to speak. We have a limit around 2 minutes for up to 5 speakers. So if you wanted to speak and haven't signed up, please do so while it's too long.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having Crystal and I this morning. We're excited about working with Riverwood. I'm here because initially Crystal had not been hired, and so I was working with Northwest Learning Community, which is the one that I'm charged with. But I was supporting some schools in Central Learning Community. So as Crystal gets more acclimated with the process, she will actually be your point person with Wilson County Schools. With the charter district movement, there is a facilitator that works with each of the different learning communities, and they're your first line of contact with the district. Broadly speaking, your chair and your principal work directly with the folks who are in our position, Crystal, as time goes on, in terms of helping, supporting you with strategic planning, with RFF, which is what I'm about to talk about, and anything that is related to charter system work. I think that this is a great conversation to follow what you were just speaking of. Riverwood is a very unique school, in a very unique position with the charter system, because you were previously a conversion charter. There are only 3 schools that are in the charter system that were conversion charters. This is very important to you because I heard the term waiver several times during this morning's meeting, and it's really important that you capture the waivers that are already in place here as a result of your conversion charter, and determine as a governance council what's important for you to keep. Understand that next year all of your waivers will go away except for the ones that you request through this process. I want to be very clear about that because that needs to be captured, and that needs to be a part of the presentation that I'll go through today. In addition to the waivers that are already in place as a conversion charter, under your conversion charter, any waivers that you need to do work moving forward, which would be in your strategic initiatives on your strategic plan, those waivers would need to be requested through this request for flexibility process as well. So I wanted to make sure we were clear about why this is so important, and really, really important to Riverwood because of your status. Any questions before we move on? Okay, so let's talk about the request for flexibility process. How much time do I have? I know we're running a little behind.
15 minutes?
Okay, I can make that happen. This all starts with the charter system theory of action. Basically that Fulton County has about 95 schools, very diverse in strengths and needs, that there's untapped excellence and innovation in each of those schools, and that there is a need for shared governance and flexibility. Now that already exists in Riverwood because of your conversion charter status, but all of our schools do not, at this point, operate in that way where there's shared governance between the community and the principal. So that's why there was a need for a charter system in Fulton County. So let's talk about a request for flexibility, what it is. First, a request for flexibility is a proposal to the superintendent. And that's very key here because the superintendent is the person who waives, who gives you the right to waive areas of Title 20. So two different things that you can waive. state policy, which is Title 20, and I'm sure you all are very familiar with this. I have to go into a little bit more with other councils, but
Can you explain what Title 20 is?
sure. Title 20 is the education law in the state of Georgia. So anything dealing with seat time, course requirements, graduation requirements, anything that deals with education is held in Title 20. So if you'd like to go back and look that up, there's lots in there to look at. So that is the part of the state law that we have the ability to waive. As a district, we have decided to limit the amount of district waivers. So district waiver would mean that every school in Fulton County gets to waive whatever that is. But what Dr. Abosa has decided to do instead is to look at the waiver process on a school-by-school basis. What do you need for your school? What do you need to waive in Title 20 for your school? But not only Title 20, but also local policy. That's the other portion that you'll be looking at waivers in terms of your strategic initiatives and any ongoing work that you have here at Riverwood. So those are the two pieces that you would be looking at waiving. Now, it's a lot out there, and so that's part of Crystal's job. She'll work with Dr. Shaw, with Opie, and with Ms. Greenway. Sorry, Mr. Blackwell. I call everybody a Mr. and Ms. except for you. She will work with them directly to determine if there are policies or laws that need to be waived. Because there may be things that we haven't thought about or you all haven't thought about as you go through your strategic initiatives. And that's her responsibility to kind of figure it out and walk it through the departments within Fulton County Schools and our cabinet to determine what actually needs to happen for you to be able to implement your initiatives. Okay? Requests for flexibility are a part of your school's strategic plan. Now, they may not show up very explicitly on your plan, but they should be part of the work that goes into your strategic direction. Now, what do I mean by that? For example, here at Riverwood, you have a different bail schedule than all other high schools. So it may not say on your actual strategic plan paper that we want to waive seat time. It may not say that explicitly. It may say whatever the bail schedule is, you decide that you will have classes that maximize student instructional time. That's very kind of broad. But within that, you'll write an action plan, or the leadership team, Dr. Shaw, will write an action plan, and in that, it will show where you need a waiver in order to successfully implement that strategic initiative. So it doesn't have to be explicit, but it needs to be aligned to one of your strategic initiatives. So I guess I'm saying don't ask for waivers, don't request flexibility just for the requesting sake. It has to align in order for it to be approved by the superintendent. It must undergo a 30-day public comment period, and I'll get more into this in a second, so we'll delve a little bit into what that 30-day public comment period should look like. And any request for flexibility has to have a 2/3 vote of the school governance council. So 2/3 of you have got to be in agreement in order for it to move forward. And finally, it has to be approved by the superintendent. It goes through your area superintendent first for approval, and then on to the superintendent. So just a quick review of the process. We're in that long green arrow at the top, which is school strategic planning. That's a necessary requisite in order to move forward with your request for flexibility, because every request for flexibility has to be aligned to your objectives or your long-term outcomes. If they are not aligned, then it will not go through. So that's why it's important to get the school strategic planning process down first. And I wanted to make just a quick comment about some of the things you were talking about earlier about what should have happened first in terms of the strategic planning process. Because of the way you moved into cohort 1, you had to follow the timeline that the school, that the district gave you in order to continue on with the waivers that you have and to move forward with your transition into the charter system versus being a charter school. So that's why that timeline is a little tight, and it may not seem very organic, but it's necessary for us to continue in the work. This fall, you'll complete your RFF, and actually Crystal handed you out a piece of paper It has a timeline on it. What is the name of this one? The overview and instructions. That gives you a little bit more information about the dates that everything has to be done. And I'll walk through that in a second, but that's the first sheet that we'll look at. So let's look at the deadlines for the RFF proposals. You'll notice the first one I want to point out is in November 11th. November 11th is the time that you actually have to go to this public comment period, which we're going to talk about. And November 11th is so important because that 30-day window, remember we have a Thanksgiving break for a whole week this year, and we have a 2-week winter break. So in order for you to successfully have your public comment period and then make any changes to your RFF as a result of your public comment, you really need to have that by November 11th because January is when these are due, as you'll see. So that's a date that we are saying you should target for your RFFs. That is a very tight window, which means that you all have a lot of work to do between now and then. But you're completely on the right track by having the discussions up front as a governance council about your strategic initiative and where you want to go as a school. Any questions about the deadlines?
What does January 31st very bottom? I can't see it. What does that say?
It's on yours.
Oh, it is?
Uh-huh. It's a response from Fulton County
Okay.
Schools. That's when you will know whether or not your request for flexibility has been approved. Yes. Before you talk, and the reason that date is there is because we want it to be in line with budget season, so that if any of your requests for flexibility require you to change your general operating budget, that you will know in time to do that for next school year. Yes, sir.
No specific question about deadlines,
Okay.
More about process, and since we are in this tight window and there could conceivably be a great deal of material for us to go through, what is the process for revisiting waivers that we write in? What's the process for creating new waivers that we might have overlooked because we didn't have a sufficient amount of time to go through the material we need to go through?
Wonderful
So is this a dynamic process?
The answer is yes. Probably not as dynamic as you want it to be, but yes. You can revisit this once per year at this point. Once all schools roll into the charter district. So we're rolling in by cohort. There's cohort 1. Cohort 2 just began their process. That's about 37 schools. Cohort 3 will begin their process next August. So over this, I guess, next 2 years after now, period, we will only have requests for flexibility once a year, and it will fall in this fall time frame. Post the roll-in of the entire district, it may come more often, but right now, because of the sheer number of schools that we're having to roll in, it's only once per year. So if you don't ask for the right things right now, you will not be able to ask for those things again until this time next year. Does that answer your question? Okay. So let's talk about the public comment period. You will discuss your draft RFF at a SGC meeting in the same way that you did your strategic plan today. Following that, you will need to post the draft of the RFF for school and community review. We are requiring that it be posted on your web page and in print for at least 30 days. Again, this is a minimum of 30 days. It does not have to be more than 30 days, but it can be. A lot of schools want it to be more than 30 days. You can put up an RFF tomorrow if you're ready for it, but it has to at least, hit that November 11th date in order for you to make this 30-day time frame. This is important, this third box here. Your comment period is managed by your Outreach and Communications Committee. That is the committee that manages this public comment process. So although all of you as a council own the RFF process, the outreach committee is really the people who will manage the part that involves the public. Does that make sense? So whoever that committee chairperson is, I would go ahead and start thinking about how you want this process to run now, so that it's smooth and allows for the ample or maximum number of community members or stakeholders to comment. After the 30-day comment period is over, then you will review your feedback, revise it, and then you have to have another public meeting where you put on your agenda, and you all are great about putting things on your agenda on the website, but it must be on your agenda that you will vote at that next school governance council meeting. So that and at that point, it's really not an opportunity for the public to re-engage on the RFF. However, the idea is that you have made some changes to the RFF based on the overwhelming voice of your community. You will get a checklist from us, from Crystal, so that you can manage this process a little bit better. We'll tell you exactly what you need to do and when you need to do it, so you can check that off. I see the chair of the outreach committee like, yes, 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 please. We will. So, some tips for accepting public comment, and this is stuff that you already know. Make sure there's a sign-up sheet, which you do. There needs to be a time limit for speakers. Set a time limit for actually accepting the public comment. Encourage your speakers to give a written account of their comments so that when you go back, there is something in hand that you have, since this RFF is a very large piece of how your school will operate over the next few years. Remember that your strategic plan is a 3-year document. This is a 3-year plan, as opposed to school improvement plans that have been written for 1 year at a time. So some key components of your RFF proposal, you have a copy of that in hand. It's the sheet that is stapled. That is the actual RFF application. Very short application, as you see. 3 pages. On the 4th page you do after the public comment period. Obviously, first, it's necessary that it aligns with your strategic plan. Again, if it doesn't align with your strategic plan, I promise it will not get very far in Fulton County schools. Next, it needs to have some sort of likelihood of success. Now, we call that promising practices because it may not be something that's been done before and there's data that exists on this particular idea that you have that will require a waiver. However, it needs to be based in some sort of likelihood of success. But I do want to stress that it can be innovative and something that hasn't been done before. On there, you'll see it'll ask you which waivers you are actually requesting. And again, Crystal will help you with that. Then your implications for personnel, operations, and schedule. It's important that you think about who you're going to impact by asking for this waiver. Is it going to impact Hertz Ferry next door? Is it going to impact Ridgeview because of whatever it is you're doing and what you need students to have when they come into your school? Is it going to impact transportation for the district? Is it going to impact your personnel? You need to have thought through all of those implications as you are constructing your RFF. And finally, there's a piece for the budget on there. And it is a drop-in budget, so it's closely aligned to what Dr. Shaw does. So he will be very instrumental in helping you figure out the budgeting part of this. Any questions about the structure of the document? Yes.
So we won't know what the budget is while we're doing the waivers, we'll only know after?
Good question. You build a budget. There is no knowing of anything. You tell us what you need. And there's a couple different things, and I'll talk about it very quickly. Any of your strategic initiatives need to either be funded through your general fund, so through the regular operating budget of the school, through some sort of outside grant proposal that you're writing, or the last piece is that the Fulton Education Foundation right now has what's called the seed fund. The state, once charter systems start rolling in, the state gave $100 to every single district, to each district for every single student that was in a charter system. However, with 95,000 students, it's kind of hard to do that for Fulton County. We would have broken the state's bank. So instead, they were giving us a lump sum each year, and that's $4 million, or around $4 million. So right now, there's $7.8 million for charter work in Fulton County. That money is being housed in the Fulton Education Fund. They have promised to give each learning community around $2 million. So that's kind of how they're trying to equalize or create some equity in funding. And that's not $2 million next year. That's $2 million over the 3-year implementation of the program. Our hope is that we will continue to receive that money from the state. but we have to, put in place some best practices and some stopgaps just in case we don't, so that every school that rolls into the charter system has an opportunity to receive some funding. But there is funding available.
What, do you have any idea how much Riverwood would have access to roughly, based on how many schools are in?
Roughly, if we blast this out, roughly it's $100,000
Per school.
per school. However, there are schools who won't ask for anything.
Right.
So do not limit yourself to $100,000 because you just don't know. There's a lot of variables in it, and the Fulton Education Foundation they want to ensure that everyone has access to the money, but at the same time they want to also fund great projects. So come up with something great and go for it. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Great.
Gary, could you possibly send me this PowerPoint?
Sure, absolutely. I will send it to you after
Thank you.
today. So 2 phases to the process, and I know I'm running out of time, Ms. Greenway, I apologize. Your first phase is that you finish your strategic plan, figure out what strategic initiatives will be in place, and then do your draft proposal. That's only pages 1 through 3. Second phase, you go back to the strategic plan, look at your public comment, revise your proposal, and do page 4 that will show that you have in fact considered what your public had to say. Last slide. There are lots of supports that are available to you through this RFF process. First, your facilitator is your first point of contact. Crystal is your person. She is going to make sure that what you need, she helps you navigate the system to get it. There are lots of tools available. I've given you today the overview and instructions as well as the template. We will email out Dr. Shaw an example RFF so you can get an idea of what one would look like. Obviously no one has written one at this point, so we had to create an example, but we created one that has a high school in mind that's pretty on par. And then for the chair, we will provide public comment checklist, actual script for the public comment period, and a handout for your school community. So outreach committee, I just go ahead and tell you, go ahead and be thinking about what date you want to use for your public comment meeting, where people will be able to come and talk about their thoughts. I would encourage you to wrap up all of your waivers into one period so you don't have multiple meetings about multiple things. Wrap it all up so that you can have one meeting about whatever it is you're going to ask for. But again, for your school in particular, you just really need to get rock solid on what waivers you need to continue and which ones you need to implement going forward so that you can continue to be successful. Any questions? Yes.
Public comment
Yes.
meeting, would that be within that 30 days? Because I also heard
It
you
is.
say the
It's within the
votes,
30
which
days.
would take place after the 30 days.
You
needs
have
to be open to the public, which it is anyway.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So the public comment needs to happen within that 30 days.
Okay.
But then after that 30-day period is when you revise your proposal and then come back to an open council meeting where you vote on the finalized version of the RFF, and that's the vote that needs 2/3 of the group on board with it.
Which would have to be our December meeting, right?
Yeah,
If it's
in all
in
likelihood, that's when it needs to be.
Could vote in January and put it on.
Okay.
Well, we
You
can do
could.
that.
Mhm. Any other questions? I know I kind of went through this very fast, but you can reach Crystal. She's Crystal Felix Clark. Clark with an E, CLARKE, C at FultonSchools.org. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you, that was very thorough and you were a very good explainer, I think.
Thank you. I used to be a teacher.
I'm sure we'll have questions as we move forward, and but this is a kind of good notion. And I did just remind Dr. Shaw that we had asked several times, probably before he joined us, that the leadership team or some group that he appoints carefully review the current conversion charter contract and identify any waivers that we have now and make a recommendation to this group about whether or not we want to continue those. Because we're going to have to ask for those again, so I think we need the expertise of the school leadership to tell us whether or not we want to do that. So, at least we know the time frame we have to do that. At this point, we do have two speakers. In the interest of time, Dr. Shaw, do you want to go ahead and just pass out the information items?
Sure. Very briefly, at the last meeting, I was asked to do an end-of-course test comparison, which I have done. I will send that to you. This includes Riverwood for the last 2 years compared to the Fulton average, where we've had growth and where we haven't. It also looks at Riverwood's end-of-course test scores compared to our sister neighbor schools, Alpharetta, Centennial, Milton, Northview, North Springs, and Walton, which is right across the river. I've also given you the corrected, because my math was abysmally horrific last time, so our AP pass percentages. And then the other thing, I can't take credit for this, Dr. Kopkis did some work on our IB scores, which I told you I would have at this meeting. It's pretty simple to read. It's the number of candidates, the grades they earned on a scale of 1 through 7, and then this goes all the way back for comparison purposes to 2010. So thank you for the information, sir. Greatly appreciate it. So I'll take one and pass it.
And it looks like the IB data is about all IB test takers, correct? Not just the IB candidates?
Correct.
So this does reflect the vast number of students that are in some way participating in that program. All right. So our first speaker this morning is Beth Hawks, and I will just ask if you can be mindful of the time.
Yes, I'll just be brief. I guess I appreciate you guys being here and everything. I am still wondering, there are action items that are brought up and questions that are brought up at each governance council meeting. As you know, one of the few members of the public and the community who come, I cannot see any follow-up on any of this, and I would like to request the governance council to make it public. Some example would be during the last meeting, y'all were wondering which charter you were working under and who could vote, if the principal could vote or if the students could vote. Those are things that the public and the parents would like some follow-up on. You said that you were going to have a strategy meeting on the 25th of September during your last meeting. Is that still on the calendar? I think some of the items that you brought up today could have been reserved for that meeting. Thing like the demonstration of Dropbox, most computer literate people these days should be able to figure it out, but perhaps that time would have been better spent during your planning meeting. The comments that the students make, you guys, these are the most important comments out of the entire meeting, that you need to be listening to the students and the parents for some feedback. Opie has great feedback from the teachers, and these are the parents, the teachers, and the students are who you need to be listening to. So I would recommend that you try to get a little more organized, please. The Dropbox stuff, that was 10 minutes that you could have been doing during your planning meeting. If it's still scheduled for the 25th, we need written kind of follow-up so we don't have to ask during these meetings. And please, let's listen to the teachers, to the parents, and the students a little bit more. Thank you.
Okay, and our next speaker is Ann Jarvis.
Yeah, also, one point that Beth brought up, there was voting that went on at the last meeting, and there was not a quorum established, and that was written, y'all were documented, that was documented to you, but you did not address it today, which is not appropriate. I have 3 just general issues that just wanted to bring y'all's attention. It would be great in your tactical planning right now. Riverwood has had an issue for the last 3 or 4 years with the biology department and math department. We know that from the EOC. It would be great during the lunchtime if Sandy Springs Labor, whoever educational force or the PTSA has fun, if there was something to be done during lunchtime to address the 9th graders and the rising 10th graders right now that don't have a good foundation now, biology and math, which is very clear. Something we could do to reinforce that for them, something we could do to help that. So if y'all would please consider that. The second thing is in the March-April meeting, the magnet program was brought up. There was a great deal of detail talked about it from Mr. Tesh. The entire board discussed it. It was supposed to be an action item. It was supposed to be followed up back in March, April, May, June, July, August. Here we are, September. It was addressed with Karen Cox, Dr. Muri. This shouldn't be a Groundhog Day meeting every single time. The magnet program is in 4 schools. It's written out. People, we need to follow up on what is the magnet program, what are we doing on it, and not 6 months after it was brought up as an action. Our school is overcrowded because of the magnet program, and we really need to get a handle on that. That is something tactically that should have been handled before y'all even start talking about some of the strategic stuff, because that's the core of the school. Last thing is, as far as tactical issues, I think that y'all really need to stop and look at the safety issues around the school. If y'all do not think there's a safety issue, then you've got your head in a box, because there are real issues that happen at Ridgeview that absolutely happened the same day here. Parents were not alerted to it.
I'm sorry, your time is up. Can you finish your thought?
I'm sorry, I will finish my sentence. There are real issues around safety that we really need, that affect you as students and affect you as teachers and affect all us as families. You know, really need to be aware of them, because it was announced. There was a huge community meeting that was videotaped, and Dr. Avosa was there last night. Unfortunately, Riverwood issues were not addressed. Dr. Shaw was there, and we are very appreciative of that. So again, thank you for your time. Please consider my comments, and please put our students, our community, our safety first. Thank you.
Excuse me, I did not sign the list, but I'd like to say something.
Sure.
Okay, I'm also a parent.
Can you just introduce yourself?
I'm sorry, my name is Dina Sroki, and my daughter is a sophomore here. And I think y'all, I'm really impressed by the group of people sitting here. You hit on a lot of points that concern me. And I do think there needs to be a better understanding of the IB program versus, I don't know what IB track is versus IB diploma and all of that. And I just became aware of some of the safety issues yesterday. And just as a parent, I feel when I walk around here, there's too many points of entry to the school. It seems like there's a lot of places where people can just walk in, and it's not, doesn't seem to be monitored. And that is a concern as a parent. None of this matters if your children aren't safe. And, you know, I don't want to get caught up in the hysteria, but I do think, you know, there are concerns, and I would like, as a parent, for some of you to make us feel a little better that our children are safe when they come to school here. And it just seems like if there's a police officer, they should be maybe at the points of entry. I don't know. How does that work? Where is the police officer walking around the school?
So actually, we can talk about.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we're not supposed to comment during the meeting, but I'd be happy to sit and talk to you.
I would love that. I would love that. And that's really all I have to say. This was enlightening. I might come to it a few more.
Thank you for being. All right, anything else? So just as a reminder, we are meeting again on September 25th from 4 to 6. We'll get an update on the strategic plan document, and we're going to meet our deadline, we need to be prepared to conclude it at that time. So we're going to just make an effort to read it, and then also if you have any thoughts or questions in advance, that would be helpful so that the leadership can be prepared to respond. All right, no further business. The meeting is